Hello everybody, and welcome to a basic introduction to Able. We're going to go over all the real simple stuff today, and we're going to make just a simple sprint ability, but we're going to level it up a few times and add some, go through some of the features and add some cool stuff to it. So, first things first, you're going to want to go into your plugins and turn Able on, make sure it's installed in the launcher. Come in here, tick the box, restart the editor, you should be good. Just so you know, I have some other things installed. They're all just visual. As you can see, I have like a UI plugin and I have some ones for nodes and stuff. It's whatever. Not important. Just make sure you got Able plugged in and you'll be fine. So, first things first, we're going to make an ability. That's pretty much where you want to start. So we'll go up into our content menu, and in advanced assets, we'll have Able now. So we'll make a new ability blueprint. This is just the base one, empty. So we'll call this sprint ability because that's what we're going to work on today. And first thing we'll do, we'll go over the UI. On the left here, we have all of the real simple basic ability stuff. We'll start from the top with the targeting. This is where you can grab some collision information straight away, get information about what's in front of you and around you. So say, for example, if we had a grenade ability that would explode, it would be really useful to say, hey, I want to use a sphere. We'll turn on this so we can draw the shape. And then you can come in and you can set the radius and things like that. If you want to do a melee swing, you could get the cone here. This targeting here actually happens on before the ability even triggers. So this is really good for getting prior information to use in the ability. For example, it's really handy for if you clicked required target, for example, if you wanted to do a grapple ability, this would only trigger and it would only perform the ability, because we have required target turned on, if there was a valid target that we had set up here. So that's what that's really handy for. We also have the length of the ability, so we can change how long it is. We have the cooldown. We have these dynamic bind values. We'll talk a bit more about those later. We have a play rate, which works if you had abilities, this would be your attack speed effectively, how quick the ability is happening. We have is passive, which the only difference between an active ability and a passive ability is that you can have as many passive abilities going at the same time as you want. There's no cap on them. Whereas an active ability, you can only have one going. You can only have one active ability active, generally. So yeah, we can also give passive stacks. We can add to stacks, and you can give it a max amount. So every time that ability is called again, it will increase the stacks. There's a decay time a little bit further down. So if we gave this 1 every 1 second, it would reduce the stack value. If it's 0, then obviously it just doesn't work. We have different options here for decreasing on when the loop restarts maybe, or however you want to do it. We have is looping. So again, this is just kind of is what it is. You can decide where you want it to begin and end, how many times you want it to loop. Stack decay is grayed out now because we're not passive. We don't want to be looping. And is channeled allows us to give different conditions as to whether we want to end the ability early. So we'll go through that as well, because that's actually something we're going to look at. And we have the tag container, which means you can give gameplay tags to the abilities to be queried later for whatever reason. A good example of that is a melee swing might have a melee ability, a melee tag, and a ranged ability might have a projectile tag, something like that. Okay, so that's the kind of the general properties that you have available to you. And yeah, next thing we'll do, we'll take a look at the timeline, and the first thing you'll notice is that if you right click it, you can add a task. And these tasks are fundamentally what build the ability, and everything works around tasks. So let's give an example. Let's play an animation. It will pop up and ask me which one you want to play. So let's play the jump animation. And it actually resized the ability to match the length of the animation for me, just in case you wanted that. So now if I press play, you can see that I jump. If I click on the task, I have all my parameters and things I can change. So I can change the animation and play something different. You can change the different montage sections and things, the animation mode, the single, animation node dynamic, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is how you interact with the tasks and set them up to work in the way that you would like. We're not doing that right now. We're going to be making our own really simple task, and we're going to make it in the simplest way possible first. So we're not even going to look at this right now. We're going to actually go over into the graph, and the graph is kind of, you know, it's what you expect in a blueprint. Every ability is still a U object at the end of the day, so it has events and functions and everything. So we're going to do the most basic thing possible. We are in a third-person template, and we all know that you casted a third-person character for that. But anyway, it doesn't even matter. We just cast a character. But this is how we're going to interact with things inside of our abilities. So you'll see we have this pin called context. And what we can do with context is, well, what the context is effectively is it's all the information that ability knows about. So when you do a collision query and you add to targets, that gets added to the context. So if I did this and I said targets, I can get the target actors. So if I did a collision query in here, collision query, and these got added to the target actors, right, whatever I did here, it gets added to the target actors, right? And then I could query them in here. I could ask for that information because it's added to the context. Other things you can do with the context, if we just have a look through, you get some information about the ability. You can get the scratch pad. You get the start location, loop iteration, how many stacks you have, current time ratio. There's a lot of things you can get from here, and there's a lot of things you can add to it as well. So the context is really what everything focuses around when it comes to moving data through the abilities. You pump everything into the context that you need, and you push it out the other end after the ability is done. So in this example, we're going to do a sprint ability. Oh, we don't want a query. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something really simple, right? We're just going to get our owner. I'm going to get the ability owner. And we're going to cast to a character. And then I'm going to get the character movement component, if I can spell. And then we'll increase the move speed. We'll set it to 1,000. What is it by default? 600? 600 or 500? And then we'll do the same on end as well, but we'll reduce it back. So if we do this, and then I'm going to use my never mind. There we go. Okay. Okay, so we have an ability. It's going to set it to 1,000 on begin when the ability starts, and then it's going to set it back to 600 when the ability ends. So this is like the most basic way you could build an ability, right? It's just start and end, simple as that. For our purposes right now, it pretty much works, so why not, right? Let's next look at how we're going to trigger this ability and how we're going to use it. So let's go into our third-person character. And I cleaned all this up earlier because I hate having all the clutter. Sorry, that's literally the only difference. I haven't changed anything. And what we're going to do is we're going to add an ability component. So we'll find ability. And that's pretty much what we need to do there. So now we're going to make our button. So we'll do input shift, left shift. That'll work fine. And now we're going to need to do two things. We need to create the context, and then we need to activate the ability. The reason we need to create the context is, again, I said everything revolves around that context. The ability is like a dumb mechanism for doing whatever is inside of that context. So we create the context and then we activate the ability with all that information in it. So we're going to create context. And we'll just pass that in. And then you get a choice here, but nothing happens. So there's a reason for this, because we actually want the class. So we'll do class, and now we have an option. So we'll do our sprint ability. So now we have all that information from our sprint ability. We know what class we're going to do, and we are creating the ability context. So the first thing I need to say, because this happens all the time, owner and instigator, very important, because what have we done? We've queried our context, and we've asked for the owner. So what I see time and time again is people do this. They query the context for the owner, and they don't have anything plugged into the owner, and then they wonder why it doesn't know what the owner is. Well, you haven't told it. In this case, we'll plug it into the owner and the instigator. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter. But yes, so this is going to make sure that this actually works and gets back the correct information. So after that, we can get our context and we can activate it. Now, one way you can pass in data to the context quite easily without having to like save it somewhere prior or have it linked to another system. If you just want to push some custom data into it, you can set parameters. So there's float, int, string, uObject, and vector. These are like the general, the most used ones, obviously. So I could have a parameter here called my owner, right? Which obviously makes no sense whatsoever because, yeah, we already have the owner value. But as an example, you could do this. So we could set our uObject parameter, my owner, and then inside the ability, instead of doing this, I could get parameter, and then I could get my owner, and then I could do that, and it would be the same thing, right? Completely pointless in this case, but that's a way of passing in information that can be really handy. So we created a context, we've given it the information it needs, we're activating the ability. We're going to clean this up real quick. There we go. And yeah, we should be good. If I press shift now, I should start running. Yep, there we go. I speed up. And then it stops after a second because, well, that's what the ability does, isn't it? The ability lasts 1 second, and then it puts the speed up, and then it puts it back down. Okay, cool. So we've made our first ability. It's working exactly how we told it to work. Great. So where do we go from here? Well, what I would say is that this isn't a very good reusable solution for increasing your speed. It's also quite static. It only works on start and end. So we're going to make use of the thing that Able is great at, and that is the timeline. But in order to do this, because there isn't a increase move speed task, we're going to need to make one. So what we'll do is we'll come back out and we will create a new task. Let's create a folder. We'll call it abilities. We'll create a folder called custom tasks. And inside custom tasks, we'll have another folder called scratch pads. Okay, so inside custom tasks, we'll open this up. We'll create a new blueprint class, and we'll put in custom task. Able custom task. Press select, and we'll call this move speed adjustment custom task or something. I don't know. Whatever. Probably way too long and complicated, but it's fine. So we have our move speed adjustment, and you have a completely blank thing with not much to do in it. Okay, how do we interact with custom tasks? Well, if we look at a custom task, if we look at a task in general, actually, I should say, what are things we notice about it? So if I bring up, this animation, well, other than the fact that that's being annoying. It's just, come on. Okay. You have a beginning, you have all the content in the middle, and then you have an end, right? So pretty basic stuff, and we can interact with it in just that way. So if we come into the functions, we can override, and we can do it on task start, on task end, on task tick, and that does exactly what you think. It's going to trigger here, ticks all the way through, and it's going to trigger at the end. So let's do sort of the same thing we did before. So let's go into override, and we can do an on task start this time. And we have our fancy context pin. We know how the context works now. It's all the information the ability has. This has a little bit extra, but it is generally the... no, this doesn't have extra, sorry, but you do have extra information in here, because if you right-click inside the task, you do have custom task properties as well. You can get the task length, time, end time, and you can get the task scratch pad as well. So with that out the way, let's just make this sprint ability again. So we'll get our owner, because this is the owner, not of the task. Well, it is the owner of the task, which is the owner of the ability, which is the exact same thing as this. So we'll get owner, we'll cast a character, and you know what? We can literally actually just, there you go. We'll literally just do that. Why not? Okay. And then on task end, we'll do the same. We'll literally just cut it out here. Boom. Because it's all the exact same data. It's just happening at a different time. On task end, we do have some more information. We can see how we ended. So you could do a switch, and we could say, okay, if it was successful, we want to slow down. But maybe if it was interrupted, you could have your character trip up. Maybe like you could trigger a different ability that does something different. You could do whatever you want with that. So let's just do that for now, though. And yeah. So now, I'll tell you what, we'll do some other things real quick, actually. We'll go through some more overrides. So what information do we have here? We can get the descriptive task name, which does what you think. So if I come into add task, it's going to give you more information like down here. It's going to be the descriptive task name. We can get the category, which is going to tell you where it goes in that list. Is it animation category, audio category, blueprint category? By default, they go into blueprint and they go under custom. There you go. You can even see it there. But if I change this to, if I override it, and I'll just type in movement. And this is a parameter, so you can make logic and plug this in, right? So you could have a different task description based on the parameters that you've set up, if you wanted to. So, okay, I've changed this to movement. So now if I go back into the ability, add task, you'll see that move speed adjustment custom task is actually under movement. Simple as that. Is single frames is one that we actually do need to change, because we want our is single frame to be no. Now this could be hooked up to a parameter. I'll show you how parameters work later, but for now we'll just leave this as false, because we don't want it to be a single frame. And we have some other things. We have on tick, is done, other stuff that we can mess with, but for now we're not too bothered. So we're just going to leave that as it is. And we'll get rid of this play animation. And now we're going to use it. So we'll come in here, we're going to movement, and we use our move speed adjustment. And because we changed this parameter, because we told this to be false on is single frame, we can now drag the length around if this was true. And if you ever have this, because I've compiled the task, the ability doesn't know about it, come into the graph, compile, and it will bring it back. Now, because it is single frame, we can't do anything. It's literally, it is a single frame. It's going to be one, just done. So we're going to change this back to false. We'll compile, we'll refresh. And yeah, so now we can give it an amount of time. So let's say this is a 1 second ability, and we'll do it for like that. So now when I run, it's very short, and if I'm spamming the button, there's like a gap in between because there's a blank part of ability there. So it still has one active ability running, even though it doesn't look like anything's happening, because we have all this blank part of the task. So I have like a half a second gap between running because I've left these gaps here. Okay, cool. So why is this better? Because it hasn't really changed anything. Other than I can change where it starts and where it ends, but in a sprint ability, like, who cares, right? Well, let's have a look at other things we can do. So we can set parameters inside of tasks, and in this case, our main parameter is going to be max walk speed. So let's drag this out. We'll promote to a variable, and anything that is marked as public like this, editable instance, and you don't even need to expose it, as long as it's instance editable, then it will now show up. Oh, we need to refresh again. Here. So now, if I set this to something like 5,000, and I sprint, now I'm going way faster. And it's as easy as that. So your variables inside of tasks are your parameters, and you plug them in however you want. And this is how you'll make a lot of logic. You can use enums in here to change the way values are going to work. You can have like loads and loads of different like branching logic, and you can have parameters that are going to control all of that. So this is cool. But now we have a task that we can change where it ends and where it begins. We can change what values we give it. Cool. So one thing that that's still a little bit weird is we have this static value here. And maybe your walk speed always will be set to 600, but it's a bit weird, right? So what we'll do instead is we want to get the original value before we changed it. And we can't actually save information here. So if I go into start and I make a default walk speed, and I tried to set it, and let's just do this. Oh, I can there we go. So this is going to give me an error. So default walk speed is read-only within the context and cannot be set to a new value. So these values here cannot be saved to. They're read-only. We cannot create them and give them information. So all they're good for is making editable and then using inside of the taskbar, the task properties. That's literally all they're used for. So if I remove this, how can we save information, use it across the task, or even across the ability? We're going to use a scratch pad. And let me show you how to make one. So we'll do a custom task scratch pad, and we'll call this the move speed. I'll just call it _sp for scratch pad. And that wants to go in there. And that wants to go in there. And this is basically just a variable holder. It's a little thing on the side that we can push data into, and we can pull it out of as we want to. It creates itself with the ability, and it deletes itself with the ability or task, whether it's an ability scratch pad or task scratch pad. It will exist with it, and then it will remove itself afterwards. So what can we do in this? Let's open it up properly. We need one variable. We need our original speed. And we'll save that as a float. And we're good. So we'll override in here, and we'll override the scratch pad. Get task scratch pad class. We'll tell it we want it to use the move speed scratch pad. And what we'll do now is on task start, we will, oh no, we actually want that. Well, from the context, we will get scratch pad. Now we don't want the ability scratch pad, we want the custom task scratch pad. So we'll get this. We'll cast it to the move speed scratch pad. We'll make it pure because we know it's that. And we will set our original speed. And I'm just going to pop that in there. So these are, if you're seeing the shortcuts and things, these are the add-ons that I have. I'll probably make a separate video, pop it in the description if you want a little walkthrough on what add-ons I use, because as you can see, they're kind of handy. But yeah, so we're going to use this, and we're going to plug this into here, and then we'll hit Control R, and that will, there we go. So cool. I have my original speed now set to my scratch pad, so we can do on task end. That scratch pad still exists, so we'll get the scratch pad again, get the task scratch pad. We'll still cast it to move speed, make it pure, and now we'll get the original walk speed, and now I will plug that into the set walk speed. So now when we start and when it stops, it'll go back to the original, and that's kind of automatic, right? Now, another thing you could do is you could say, have a Boolean, for example, here. And you could say, return on end. We'll get rid of that because that didn't work. So if return on end is true, then it's going to do that. If it doesn't, then it will keep the speed. So you know, now you've given yourself an option. It's obviously a bit of a stupid option for what we're trying to do, but you could turn it off, and then you would have, like, you know, basically just a toggle for that amount of speed, right? Now it's never going to go back to whatever. So that's you know, how you can work with custom tasks, how you can work with the scratch pads and what they're good for. Like, they're good for saving information and using it in different functions and moving that data around. Yeah, so cool stuff you can do with custom tasks. So the next thing we'll look at is having the ability to actually act a bit more how you would expect sprint to work, because sprints generally don't last for 1 second and then stop. So we'll add is looping because we want it to loop. If the max iterations are 0, it will just loop forever. So if I hit save, we'll come in, and now we can start the ability. And yep, sure enough, it is going forever. So yeah. In fact, we can't actually stop the ability because we haven't given it a way to do that. So it's just actually going forever, and we're kind of stuck with it. So let's change that, shall we? We'll come back into our character. We'll get my ability component, and we'll just call Cancelability. Now you'll see that there's an ability object reference. Don't think you need something like this. You don't need to save this as like my current ability and then, you know, blah, blah. No, we don't need to do that. We can just get this by class, and we'll say sprint ability. So anything, it will just search, and it will say, hey, here's the ability, it's the name of this, and it will cancel it. So we'll do that, and now if I sprint and then I let go, it stops. But if I hold down sprint, it will just run and run and run because that ability is now looping. And then if I let go, it stops. Brilliant. That's exactly how you would expect a sprint to work. Next, we'll take a quick look at the passive and channeling options. So for a sprint ability, generally I probably have it as a passive. It obviously depends on your game, but as an active, you couldn't use other abilities while sprinting. Maybe you don't want to, that's fine. But in this case, we're just going to have it as a passive so I could do something else. With passives, you have stacks and things, not important in this case. You have different ways you can refresh duration, refresh all sorts of stuff. It's not important in this case, as I say, but there's a lot of options there to look through and mess with and play with. So in this case, we have it as a passive, and if I turn that on, it does, well, absolutely nothing. It doesn't change anything, other than the fact that I could now play another ability at the same time. So if I had another active ability, like I had a pair of pistols and I was shooting a gun, I could now do that and sprint at the same time. If sprint was an active ability, I wouldn't be allowed to use the other one because you can only have one active ability. Active. Yeah, so I'm going to set that as a passive, and I'm also going to set it as is channeled. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove this. So now I can't cancel my ability anymore. Or can I? So by is channeled allows us to do some stuff. So we can set a stack of conditions. We can have a custom one. We have input. We have velocity. And input and velocity are actually great for exactly what we were trying to use it for. So let's use input. And we have some conditions here. We have enhanced input if you're using that, or we have normal input actions. So let's do a sprint. And I actually probably need to set that in here. Not editor, sorry. Project settings, input, and it'll be a action mapping. I'll put it there. Okay. So, in theory now, if channel conditions sprint needs to be active, and it must pass all conditions. If it fails, then it's interrupted. So if I start sprinting now and I let go of left shift, it actually stops. Even though I removed it from here, this isn't connected. But what it's realizing is that it's on tick, it's saying, is this input still active? If it is, then it's going to allow the ability to continue. If it isn't, then it's going to remove it. It's going to turn itself off. So we could also do, let's put that back. I didn't mean to do that. I wanted to close it. So we can add another one. Let's add velocity. So if our velocity threshold is under like 500, then I think it should just stop itself. Is that? Hold on. I think I want to negate that one. So it needs to be over 500. Otherwise it would just stop itself, which doesn't actually work. All right, yeah, okay. So the theory behind this one is you can get going, but then if you like, where is it? Come on, sprint, go on. Maybe I need to put the number down a little bit. 400 is 500 like what it runs at. I thought it was 600. Okay, so if I like turn the corner really quick, it's going to stop the sprint because my velocity has changed because I'm not rotating quick enough, right? So I can sprint, and then if I change quick enough, that velocity will change under 400 and it's going to cancel the sprint. So if you wanted to have like something like that, that's a really easy way of doing it. Okay, so that's channeling and that's passives. Yeah, that's really the real basics to it. We've gone through tasks, we've created abilities, we've cancelled them, we've looked at other ways you can cancel them with channeling, we've looked at the passive stuff. Yeah, and I'll do another episode which is going to be a little bit more advanced. We'll do some other things and we'll look at other options like dynamic binds and how they work. Anyway, thanks very much, guys, and I will see you next time.